Hello everyone. In this video, we will discuss about meaning and types of inflation. In the ordinary sense, inflation means a rise in the general price level. When the level of currency of a country exceeds the level of production, inflation occurs. Value of money depreciate with the occurrence of inflation. According to Crowther, inflation is a state in which the value of money is falling and the prices are rising. The two limitations of this definition are every increase in the price, according to him, is inflationary and harmful. But a rise in the price level during a period of depression is not at all harmful. It is a sign of recovery. Crowther's definition touches only the symptoms and not the causes of inflation. In the words of Professor Colborn, inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. This definition is superior to the earlier one as it makes a comparison between the quantity of money and the supply of goods. But the difficulty with this definition is that there is no dependable technique with which the actual demand for money can be accurately assessed. According to Keynes, the rise in the price level after the point of full employment is true inflation. In the words of Milton Friedman, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. The stock of money is the final determinant of the level of prices. A student of economics should have a short and simple definition of inflation in his mind for ready reference. For this purpose, we may define inflation as a sustained rise in the general price level. Now let's look on to the types of inflation. First one, on the basis of speed. Inflation has been classified into four on the basis of speed, namely creeping inflation, walking inflation, running inflation, and galloping or hyperinflation. Creeping inflation. Creeping inflation is slow and mild. In the case of underdeveloped countries, creeping inflation is a tonic for economic development. When the creeping inflation gathers momentum, we experience what is called walking inflation. Walking inflation is not dangerous, but it gives the warning that prices are going to rise faster and further. Under a situation of running inflation, the rise in the price level becomes sharp and vigorous. Galloping or hyperinflation refers to a situation of ever-rising prices at a very fast rate. Usually, it is very difficult to control hyperinflation. Germany and Austria experienced hyperinflation in the early 20s of the 20th century. Now, second type, open and suppressed inflation. According to Milton Friedman, open inflation is an inflationary process in which prices are permitted to rise without being suppressed by government through price control or similar techniques. The inflations which were experienced in Germany and Austria in the early 20s and in Russia and China in the 40s of the 20th century are examples of open inflation. On the other hand, if the rising prices of essential goods are suppressed by the government through a policy of price control and rationing, we have got what is called suppressed inflation. Once these controls are withdrawn, the prices will rise with vengeance. The main symptom of suppressed inflation is the long queues of buyers at the ration shops. Now, third type of inflation, stagflation. One of the recent contributions to the literature on inflation is stagflation. Stag being derived from stagnation and flation from inflation. It represents the paradoxical coexistence of rising prices on on the one hand and unemployment on the other. Such a phenomenon was experienced by the industrially advanced countries of the world in the 70s of the 20th century. Now, fourth type of inflation, slumflation. Slumflation represents the coexistence of a slum in terms of output and employment and rising prices. Slumflation is experienced mainly in underdeveloped countries owing to the scarcity of essential inputs. Now, let's look at two other types of inflation we used on demand and supply factors. Thus, earning the names demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Demand pull inflation, it occurs when the aggregate demand increases at a faster rate than the aggregate supply. Demand pull inflation will typically occur when the economy is growing faster than the long run trend in the rate of growth. If demand exceeds supply, firms generally will respond by pushing prices on the upper side, and thus we have a demand pull inflation. In case of cost push inflation, this occurs when there is an increase in the cost of production for the firms, causing aggregate supply to shift to the left. Thus, cost push inflation could be caused by rising energy and commodity prices. Typically, in simple words, it means, for example, if the transportation cost increases because of the increase in the fuel prices. Ultimately, this added cost will be passed on to the consumer in the form of high prices. So, that's all about my topic about meaning and types of inflation. Thank you.